Hello, welcome to the stock out. This is the second stock out since we revamped it, added Grace. And Grace, we have a lot to go over today. I don't know how we're going to do it.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff. And also, I just peeped the new graphic that we have too. You're right. You mentioned it in the newsletter. It's a lot nicer. So shout out to our team over there. They're killing it in the graphics.
Yeah, although I do miss the old one also, that the conveyor belt to nowhere is what I called it.
Yeah, that was good too.
Yeah, so what we're going to do today, a lot to go over, a lot of news in CPG and retail space. We put aside 26 minutes to go over two different industries, two different verticals, retail and CPG. We talk a little bit about each. Kroger announced major divestiture last week. Last Thursday, we'll talk about that. We'll hit on the big news today in CPG land. Smucker is acquiring Hostess, $5.6 billion deal. Who knew Twinkies are worth quite that much? And then we're going to interview Flowspace co-founder and CEO Ben Eachus. So that'll be informative as well. Before we do that, I want to make sure anyone who would like to sign up for the newsletter knows how to do that. So all you need to do is go to www.freightwaves.com/the stockout, or just go to freightwaves.com, go up to newsletters and click on that first one, the stockout CPG and retail. We'll try to send you a newsletter each week with some news on both of those verticals, as well as what's happening in the freight space. So I can look forward to that every sort of Wednesday or Thursday, depending on schedules. And with that, we'll go into the first topic. And I'll sort of say what I think about this, and then I'll see if you sort of agree with me or don't. So Kroger last Thursday, big announcement, announced it's going to divest 413 stores and the buyer is CNS Wholesale Grocers. It's just one of these companies that's kind of one of the biggest companies you've never heard of. It's one of the largest privately held companies, and they're primarily distributors, so they're a little bit behind the scenes. That 413 stores could be up to 650 stores. So as we know, Kroger in the middle of trying to get this deal done with Albertsons, sort of the biggest traditional grocer, that keyword being traditional. They're not as big as, let's say, Walmart in the grocery space. Trying to get that done with Albertsons. It does need FTC approval. And going into the deal, when it was announced last October, Kroger thought that they could get it done, provided that they divested anywhere from 100 to 350 or 375 stores, something in that range. And they seem to have found a really good partner here with CNS Wholesale Grocers. I think it alleviates a lot of the concerns that some people had as far as stores closing. Those stores seem like they're going to be open. This is going to be a unionized company. They say they're not going to get rid of any first, frontline workers. They'll get rid of workers that do things like investor relations and those things. But that seems to alleviate a lot of the big concerns. And it seems to me that this deal is much more likely to close and receive FTC approval now that we found a buyer for these stores, and it checks a lot of these boxes. And Kroger's lawyers thought they could get it done even with fewer stores, something less than 400 stores. Now they're going to sell 413, and there's the option for Kroger to divest all the way up into the 650 stores, which would be the maximum, under the current agreement. So I kind of go from thinking, before last week that there was an 85% chance. I'm just kind of using round numbers here, 85% chance that the deal was going to close, was going to get approval. Now I think it's more like a 95% chance. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they really figured out every issue that they had with getting this deal done. A big part, both you and I touched on our shows, probably around March, right, of this year, was the union aspect of some of these stores too. And it sounds like this is a perfect buyer for them to take over a number of those stores in particular. And no stores will have to close because of it. So for the employee side of it, I think this is fantastic. And then for, of course, the consumer and getting this deal done, it sounds like they hit that right on the mark. You brought this up. 650 stores was their absolute max. They said the deal won't happen if they have to go past that. And now they have almost 100 and 70 or so stores to play with on top of that. So I think this is great. I think it's creating another competitor in the space too, which pushes back any thoughts of this being too big of a monopoly, I guess you could say, or of a company to compete with. And it still allows, I think, Kroger to compete with what some of, you could say, Walmart, Amazon in particular is also brought up by physical stores, some of their bigger competitors too. So I think it seems positive to me. And the other side of it too, the employees should be happy about a lot of the fears they had earlier this year.
Yeah, it doesn't seem anti-competitive to me. There were also a couple of interesting things that came out of their analyst call on Thursday that I jotted down here. I'll bring up. They said the valuation of the store is just under 3 times EBITDA. When they did have that original SpinCo in October, they sort of anticipated being about 3 times EBITDA. So maybe it was a little bit below that, but originally they were thinking that they were going to spin off those companies, spin off those stores into a new company, but then they would still have to sell some, find a third party for some stores. So it doesn't seem like it was too different than what they originally expected for valuation, maybe a little bit lower. They also talked about, sort of unrelated to the deal, that the disinflation in grocery prices was a little bit more intense than they had anticipated. They say that now they expect for the year inflation to be like 1% to 2%, down from 3% to 4% previously for their fiscal year. So I thought that was interesting. And they also said that the CPG companies are working with them a little bit more closely on getting prices lower to move more tonnage. So I thought that was incremental. And then on the consumer, they said that, really they're on a couple different tracks, and those lower income consumers, they're really seeing more fluctuation based on when SNAP payments come through, or when there's a payday during the 15th or 30th of the month. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah. They said e-commerce still growing nicely, up 12% year over year, and sort of highlighted those are the best consumers because those consumers tend to spend 3 times as much, with them. So I thought those were interesting points there.
And I will say too, I feel like that also kind of showcases a little bit of the consumer health, right? At the same time, if that's if they can see that down to the day, that's pretty exceptional too.
Yeah, and that point about this working with the CPGs are being more accommodative on price cuts. I thought that was a little bit incremental to what we've heard from some of the other retailers that said, well, we want to get these prices down, but haven't really had anything definitive. So with that, I think we'll move on to the next topic. Smucker today buying Hostess. Have a stock chart on that showing a nice bounce for ticker TWNK. That was one of the better tickers, symbols. So they own Twinkie. So it's being acquired, $5.6 billion enterprise value. That's 17.2 times adjusted EBITDA multiple. That comes down to 13.2 times with synergies included. They think $100 million in cost related synergies. So they think there's quite a lot of synergies there, where it sounds like they can consolidate things like some of the distribution centers, some of the transportation costs, some of those things. So that was part of the motivation. Hostess has an impressive 23% EBITDA margin. And some of the interesting things there is they like the snacking segment. That's not a surprise. I've seen Mondelez really do well. But they say the indulgent segment has grown 20% faster than the healthy snacking segment. So taking a different approach than Mondelez, which Mondelez owns Oreo, a lot of the other sort of more indulgent, and they're going more in the healthy side of things. No word yet. My main question is, are we going to see a Twinkie Uncrustable or a Hostess cupcake Uncrustable? Keep your fingers crossed on that.
Yeah. No, my hopes there too as well. Talk about non-healthy snacks that they could add to that portfolio, right? No, it's that's interesting too, and I'm wondering. I've noticed that just grocery shopping in a particular, on the unhealthy side of the snacks, more and more of these like private label brands too. So I wonder how much competition they do have on that side of things as well. But that's interesting to see the push away from healthy snacks more again, maybe a tell of the times, right? Where we can, if things aren't going right, if we can't travel, if we can't indulge in more activities or maybe luxury goods, why not have a snack at the end of the day to make ourselves feel a little bit better is kind of what I'm seeing there. But interesting, definitely interesting merger. And it sounds like a lot of it too, warehouse wise, the synergies between their networks should work out pretty well. So good one there for snackers in particular.
Yeah, it's almost like people like comfort food when there's times of uncertainty, which really saw that a lot in the pandemic. It seems to have continued. And they really said that they like the Hostess efficient warehouse distribution model. They didn't go into too much detail on that, but it sounds like that Hostess really has an efficient distribution model there. With that, I think we'll leave the last sort of 15 minutes for our guest. It's Flowspace CEO and founder, Ben Eachus. Ben, thank you for joining us.
Oh, he's muted for me. Can you guys turn his mic on?
Yeah, muted for me too.
There we go. Nope. Still muted.
Still not hearing you, Ben.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yep. Yay. There we go.
All right. We solved it. Well, it's great to be here, Grace and Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You know, it's funny. I was just thinking you were my first guest, I think, on Point of Sale when I took over the show. And you're now our first guest here when I started the show with Mike. So it's a perfect full circle for me. So I love Ben. Oh, yeah.
Hopefully I don't disappoint you. I mean,
yeah. Well, hey, mics are working, so it can't get worse for now, right? Could you update our audience a little bit of who Flowspace is and really what you're adding to the market today in terms of technology?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started the company about 6 years ago, and what Flowspace is a fulfillment platform that helps brands fulfill and distribute their orders across any channel that they may be selling the product. So our software essentially serves as a command center for brands that are looking to orchestrate and then also execute their fulfillment. And we work with a network of warehouse partners around the country, over 100 of them. And really our goal is to power what we call independent commerce. So companies that are increasingly taking control of their fulfillment themselves, they can leverage Flowspace to help them do that.
And I think it's really perfect to have you as a guest today, especially with a lot of the companies that we're talking about in particular, looking at how to optimize their networks. And we'll get into in a second, a lot of, especially the holidays coming up, different ways to reach consumers. But I want to talk about warehousing in particular right now. What does the market look like during the pandemic? And I would say even lately, still today, we're seeing a lot of overbuilds or really a lot of issues in regards to capacity as well and what's available for those out there, especially last minute or looking to maybe for companies that are looking to maybe stay a little bit more agile. What have you noticed from your customers and what trends have you seen in the space today?
Sure. From talking with our customers, I think there has been a lot of change. If you're talking about the pandemic to today, I think 2-3 years ago, really all of our conversations with customers were around how do we scale? How do we ensure that we have locked in capacity as our businesses grow? And while of course those are still concerns, companies are increasingly focused on how do you drive down cost and what are things that we can do to optimize? So essentially, how can I do more with less? How can I leverage technology to automate manual processes that I have in my operations functions? How can I ensure that I'm shipping my products from the right places and that I'm ordering the right quantities? I think you're still seeing some whiplash where no one wants to kind of do that over ordering that happened during the pandemic. And then I think even we're starting to have kind of customers, and I would say this is more in the nascent phase, but ask about what can AI do for my business? Really, it's less about the AI, it's more about the application for that supply chain function. On the warehouse operator side, and I think, Grace, but this maybe goes to the heart of your question, there's always been a disconnect between warehouse leasing data and utilization data of what's actually going on in the warehouse. And, I think you're absolutely correct in that we do see capacity loosening up, especially in key markets where, especially around companies that have perhaps leased based on pandemic projections, they do have capacity and they're looking for companies to help them utilize it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the big trends we're seeing now is all this, discussion and action related to omni-channel. I hear that a lot from the CPG companies that want to sell directly. Also hear that a lot from the retailers that want to meet customers where they are, sort of have those options. Sort of what sort of unique challenges does that present to either the retailer or the CPG company, and how do you help with that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think it depends on how you look at it. It could be a challenge, or for us, we think it's a massive opportunity. And first, I just want to kind of level set on what we're talking about with omnichannel. I think it means a lot of different things to different people. But for us, it means companies that are selling their products directly on their website, potentially leveraging marketplaces like Amazon or Walmart, and then increasingly leveraging social media platforms, and also selling their products in traditional brick and mortar retailers, like some of the ones you mentioned in the earlier segment. So what this means in a tactical way, when you're talking about brands that have maybe started selling their products almost exclusively online, and now we're trying to get their products into brick and mortar retail, well, the tech stack is fundamentally different. So retail runs on a system called EDI, electronic data interchange. And so they're looking for companies that can not only take in orders and help them make decisions for their digital platforms, but also absorb that EDI information, help them manage their product listings, understand, in times of inventory scarcity, who gets what? Does that retailer order get your inventory, or should it still be available to sell on your website or one of the marketplaces? So increasingly, we're seeing this shift to omni-channel mean that tech stacks need to be updated. That means you need better order management capabilities, inventory forecasting capabilities, and better connectivity to different types of ways to communicate system-wise.
It's interesting, Ben. I recently went through a couple of my latest purchases, and I'm kind of considering where that origin of that purchase came from. And of the last 5, 3 have been through Instagram, and it's the ads pop up, or I see an account, I scroll through, and I'm like, okay, that's I see someone who looks like me in the outfit, and I want to buy that. I know you've recently even partnered with TikTok in regards to their fulfillment. Can you tell me more about this social media space and what retailers are finding in regards to reaching out to customers, but also fulfilling those orders in a quick manner to stay competitive with someone like Amazon?
Sure. And Grace, I think your story is probably very relatable for many of the listeners here, in that, increasingly brands want to have their products available for sale where the customers are. And customers happen to be browsing for product information on different social platforms like Instagram and like TikTok. Flowspace, as we announced a while ago, has been fortunate to partner with TikTok on powering some of their fulfillment initiatives. So while it's still early days for some of these social media commerce platforms, we see tremendous growth potential there, because ultimately that is where the customers are. And I think that is increasingly what brands are turning to. And when you talk about omnichannel, the only reason brands are talking about that is because their customers are now, they're going back to stores in a major way. So their products need to be available on those shelves. During the pandemic, it was, everyone was shopping online, so those products needed to be available on their websites. So really the idea is, can Flowspace and help these brands essentially get those products to their customers regardless of where they're ordered. And there are many steps required in order to get that right, down from the inventory, down to routing that order to the correct place, carrying the right inventory amounts. So it's a really exciting challenge. And I think we're still in the very early days of all of this.
Yeah, some of your customers you have listed on your website, Fresh Del Monte, Pod Foods, strike me as having, sort of perishable items, maybe would need refrigerated capacity. Sort of what are some of the special challenges associated with perishable items, and how do you address those things?
Yeah, great question, Mike. And we're fortunate to be partnered with Del Monte as well as Pod Foods, which is a new age distributor, helping brands essentially get into some of the traditional grocery channels. So there are a bunch of challenges associated with this. One is e-commerce is still a relatively new category for emerging brands. So helping these brands not only plan their network, but ensure that the products are have temperature control available. Anytime you're dealing with perishable products, you're also talking about lot tracking, customized picking logic. So around FIFO or FEFO, like all the different kind of requirements necessary to ensure that you're getting through your oldest inventory first, potentially. And then really it focuses on inventory planning, because unlike a durable good, if you miss that shelf life or if you overorder, you could be sitting on a ton of obsolescent inventory. So these are really the challenges that are presented. But again, I think what we're seeing increasingly is that brands selling to through what you consider maybe traditional brick and mortar channels are also trying to sell these same products in different channels as well. And that poses a bunch of complexity that we're helping them solve. And fortunately, we have great partners in this.
Now, I'm interested, especially in the warehousing network of something more on the refrigerated side or the cold chain. It seems there's a lot of technology that goes behind it. And I would assume that, with that being said, you're looking at more up-to-date warehousing networks in particular. Is that difficult to find in the industry today, where inventory, or I guess capacity that's available for warehousing seems slim? Or do you find that there's more and more sites that are becoming up-to-date to fulfill the needs that Flowspace needs in order to make that network able to work for the cold chain as well?
Sure. I would say refrigerated or temperature control capacity is definitely harder to come by. It's more specialized. I think secondly, it's just actually more consolidated space where there's bigger players that control more of the market, as opposed to the 3PL or general warehousing market at large, which is pretty fragmented. I think with Flowspace, and we've been fortunate to partner with a company like Del Monte, who has a national network of really state-of-the-art temperature control and cold storage facilities, and kind of partnering and leveraging our software with their capacity and their amazing services, we're able to have a really unique offering in the market. But Grace, to answer your question directly, yeah, it is harder to come by for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you also, what do you think CPG companies and retailers need to consider when designing their fulfillment network? So what would you sort of highlight there? Hear different things of some saying, well, you should have fewer distribution centers. Others say you should have more closer to the customer. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
I think I would start with, if I were advising a brand that's potentially selling into some of these channels, I think I would start with, where are your customers and how are you reaching them, right? Because let's say you're a brand and you only sell in brick and mortar retail. Well, I would look at where the retailer has distribution points and aggregate my inventory around those locations. But if you have a growing e-commerce or direct-to-consumer business, I would look at where my end consumer is placing the orders, because often shipping costs are the main driver of cost after your COGS, or the cost to actually produce that item. So looking at that, you'd likely settle on, let's call it, 2 facilities where you can service both coasts, where main population centers are, without dramatically increasing your inventory holdings. And then you can start to layer on new channels. The second thing I would look at is the different type of tech stack that I would need in order to do that. I think it's not enough to have, and I've been part of many companies where they'd have essentially 2 different systems: one system that manages all your direct-to-consumer business, and another that manages your wholesale business. And what that means is you just don't have any visibility across channel. And that's really, it's not suitable. It's not adequate in today's market. You really need that visibility across channels.
Well, Ben, I really appreciate your insight today, and of course, everything that you've educated our audience on as well. Where can people go to learn more about what Flowspace is doing and reach out to you as well?
Yeah, so please visit us at flow.space. We also have, you can reach us on LinkedIn. You can email me. My email is just my first name @flow.space. Really looking forward to talking to any brand that's trying to figure some of these challenges out. That's why we started the company, and that's why we come to work every day. We're really excited to help brands solve these challenges.
Great. Well, thanks very much.
And, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Grace.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to have you. And next week on the Stockout, we have Steve Lewis, Division President of Americas and Asia Pacific, head of GXO Direct. And then the following week, we have the Bold Carts CEO Bill Reinhart. Bold Carts, the company that manufactures premium vape cartridges and other accessories for plant-based oil extracts, talking about innovation in cannabis technology. So both of those should be very interesting as well. But thanks for listening. Hope everyone has a great day.